Winter wind lashes the stone at Pembroke, rattling shutters and fading candlelight. A midwife steadies her breath while a frightened girl reaches for rough blankets. Wax warms under a pressed seal. Witnesses whisper prayers no one remembers perfectly. The mother is 13, small, devout, and suddenly responsible for a dynasty's gamble. Outside, horses stamp frost. Inside, time slows to the rhythm of dangerous labor. The child born here will end a civil war and found a new house. Historians later argue every detail. Midwives simply remember fear, blood, and stubborn survival. The name attached by posterity is Henry VII, not the Eighth. Importantly, that correction matters because myths distort agency and shrink the choices women actually faced. Does power begin in palaces or in bedrooms where consent was barely imaginable? Contemporary sources are inconsistent about kindness, pressure, and what survival required that winter. We will follow records, cautious phrasing, and the quieter angles where decisions accumulated. The near consequence is clarity. The stakes were dynastic, but the body paid first. Hold that image as we unspool her lineage, the Beaufort thread, binding opportunity and danger. Next comes the ledger of blood and names, where birthright doubled as collateral. Margaret Beaufort descended from John of Gaunt through the Beaufort line, legitimized but limited. That pedigree glittered on parchment while raising doubts about claims, inheritance, and future loyalties. In 15th century England, bloodlines functioned like currency, spendable and foreclosable by kings. Guardianship passed her between powerful households, each balancing protection against potential leverage. She learned silence young, noting who counted favors and who counted signatures before kindness. Was noble birth a shield against danger, or a beacon that invited strategic captivity? Chroniclers rarely record feelings. They record transactions, wards, dowers, lands, and marriage contracts. Through these entries, we glimpse a child translated into assets, obligations, and political geometry. The Beauforts carried loyalty to Lancaster, yet their legitimacy carried delicate asterisks in law. Rivals could weaponize those asterisks, arguing limits that shrank choices for everyone who loved her. A girl became a negotiation, then a contingency plan, then a line item labeled hope. Such structures encouraged guardians to arrange early marriage, seeking stability before wars redrew maps. Historians differ on agency here. Evidence suggests obedience shaped by survival rather than preference. The near consequence is sobering. Institutions translated kinship into collateral, spending childhood as political tender. That economy drives the next step, when marriage to Edmund Tudor promised safety and alignment. Follow her into that ceremony where vows covered calculations wider than the chapel walls. The ceremony joined her to Edmund Tudor, a match configured for legitimacy and survival. She was around 12, small in stature, older in the discipline of careful listening. Vows were spoken in measured Latin. Calculations moved faster than any priestly cadence. Consummation followed soon, as custom and strategy pressed intimacy into an instrument of state. Households counted heirs like insurance. Midwives became unwitting stewards of treaties made on parchment. The girl learned to balance reverence with resilience, attending devotions while mapping obligations precisely. Guardians, tenants, and clerks watched for signs, reading a household like a barometer. Pregnancy promised continuity. It also threatened a child body with irreversible consequences. What choice could truly exist when politics equated obedience with a narrow definition of safety? Contemporary evidence outlines schedules, transfers, and dowers. Motives must be inferred from timing and risk. Her letters are sparse. The ledger speaks more loudly than any preserved confession. She cultivated allies who valued steadiness, an asset during campaigns and uncertain harvests. The marriage anchored Lancaster hopes to a living womb, not a speculative claim. It also tied her movements to escort lists, permissions, and the scrutiny of rivals. The near consequence is blunt. The state entered the bedroom, and privacy shrank to ritual. Bridge. That constraint tightened when Edmund rode into Wales and the borderlands turned unstable. Autumn darkened early in Carmarthen, where Edmund Tudor was taken and held under guard. Disease haunted prisons. Rumors traveled faster, accusing enemies of causes no physician could prove. He died there, young, leaving a pregnant wife and unsettled accounts with several lords. Chroniclers disagree on the precise culprit. Plague is likely, malice remained a convenient story. Grief and logistics collided. Messages galloped between garrisons, monasteries, and the Pembroke household. Jasper Tudor stepped into the gap, an uncle measuring routes against weather and risk. He gathered escorts, provisions, and permissions, then planned a winter journey across rough country. Snow glazed the roads, fords swelled, the wind erased footprints faster than men advanced. Margaret traveled under watch, a widow, not yet 14, carrying both fear and inheritance. Were escorts a mercy or a reminder that her choices now belonged to other signatures? Sources converge on the destination: Pembroke, where security and kinship outweighed comfort or familiarity. The journey reads like a ledger of hazards: ice, rumor, ambush, and the calendar. Her survival strategy hardened into habit: deference in public, decisive planning in private letters. Officials marked her status carefully, protecting assets that would matter when the child arrived. The near consequence is clear: widowhood amplified scrutiny, turning movement itself into a contested act. Bridge. Arrive at the castle gates and the labor begins, a night that reshaped England. Jasper Tudor planned like a soldier and a guardian, counting miles against daylight. He secured writs, men, and pack horses, then timed departures between patrols and storms. Roads through Wales narrowed into ruts, hedges caught snow, fords turned iron cold quickly. Messengers rode ahead to friendly halls, arranging beds, fodder, and quiet chapel space. At checkpoints, Jasper presented seals, then moved before questions ripened into bureaucratic delays. Was this rescue a family duty, or a state operation conducted in miniature? Each halt measured risk: a fevered stable boy, a rumor, a hoofprint facing backward. Margaret kept devotions, rationed strength, and learned how endurance can share a saddle with fear. Escort numbers changed nightly, disguising patterns: lanterns hooded, hooves wrapped when villages slept nearby. Editorial note: chronicles are sparse on routes. Details here reflect logistics typical of winter travel. Pembroke's towers finally rose from mist, promising walls, supplies, and loyal stewards within. Inside, a room was warmed, linens aired, and a midwife placed on call. Jasper reviewed inventories: grain, wine, candles, salt, because logistics stabilize courage when news turns hard. He also checked the chapel, knowing comfort sometimes travels faster through prayer than medicine. Letters announced arrival to those who needed to keep accounts and allegiances current. The near consequence is practical: sanctuary enabled planning, converting flight into a program of survival. Bridge, protection secured, the body's deadline arrived, labor beginning under stone vaults and winter breath. Labor stretched long, a contest between small bones and the calendar's implacable will. Midwives rotated hands and prayers, candles guttered, a brazier hissed, windows held the frost. They counted breaths, contractions, and hours, marking progress with salt, water, and calm instruction. The girl clenched linen, whispered psalms, and learned endurance measured minute by frightened minute. How much agency survives when custom, pain, and expectation crowd a room this small? A child's cry finally cut through drafty stone, and the castle exhaled together. Cloth swaddled the infant, wine steadied attendance. A clerk noted names and witnesses. Editorial note: sources differ on attendants' identities. The record agrees on youth and peril. Afterbirth complications threatened. Recovery took weeks. Scars likely outlived the winter by many years. Later choices suggest lasting injury. Historians infer limited future fertility from circumstantial patterns. Piety deepened, not as ornament, but as a structure holding fear in place. Votive gifts and endowments later trace gratitude toward specific shrines and intercessors remembered from tonight. Relatives negotiated confinement terms, household staffing, and how quickly letters should travel outward. News would shape alliances, rumors moved faster. Precision mattered before enemies named the story. Nurses learned the rhythm of the child. Scribes learned the rhythm of the mother. The near consequence is stark. Survival reframed politics, turning a widow into a guardian of destiny. Bridge, politics soon demanded another recalculation: an alliance of safety with Henry Stafford. Safety, not romance, framed her next marriage to Henry Stafford, prudent and well-connected. Advisors prized a quiet roof, settled rents, and neighbors who greeted Yorkist sheriffs politely. The match stabilized titles and dowers while lowering the temperature around a vulnerable household. Clergy blessed the union, stewards inventoried plate, lawyers rehearsed custody clauses for future storms. Was compromise a betrayal, or the only arithmetic that kept a child and estates intact? She learned the posture of survival: respectful at court, firm with tenants, private in council. Gifts flowed to churches, gossip flowed to kitchens, both threaded information back to her desk. Records place her careful before Yorkist power, Never loudly partisan, always meticulously compliant in public. Meanwhile, correspondents cultivated old Lancastrian friends, a hedge against the next unexpected proclamation. Her son's wardship shifted, Raglan, Pembroke, households aligned with the new king's confidence. Sources mention clothing allowances and tutors, proof of order masking the loneliness of separation. She visited when permitted, wrote when not, and counted favors with deliberate, durable memory. Accommodation did not erase conviction. It purchased time, witnesses, and a reputation for steadiness. Neighboring ladies compared news over vigils and christenings, informal councils disguised as courtesy. The near consequence is plain. Measured loyalty protected assets and options while tempers elsewhere burned. Bridge. That caution would be tested as crowns changed heads, twice within a single turbulent decade. England lurched between banners, Edward IV triumphant, Henry VI restored, then Edward ascendant again. Every reversal reordered favors, pardons, and the list of names safe to speak. She adjusted without theatrics, refining alliances that survived regardless of who sat crown. Household worship doubled as diplomacy. Alms lists mapped loyalties better than public proclamations did. Did she thrive on luck or on systems that rewarded calm hands during convulsions? Women in great houses traded news with tact. Midwives, chaplains, factors, all carrying rumors respectfully. Letters traveled as recipes, book lists, and charitable appeals, while margins held sharper plans. She kept her Yorkist posture serviceable, yet repaired Lancastrian threads whenever horizons darkened. Aunt, cousin, and godparent networks proved sturdier than oaths shouted across muddy fields. Chroniclers favor battles, account books show endurance, leases renewed, chapels endowed, retainers quietly retained. Quiet never meant idle. It meant choosing when to speak and to whom precisely. Face-to-face meetings at markets or saints' days allowed discreet testing of a shifting wind. By 1470-71, the storm peaked. Rebellion, restoration, then defeats at Barnet and Tewkesbury. Those shocks narrowed her choices and widened the distance to a son growing tall. The near consequence is inevitable. Survival now required separating mother and child for longer stretches. Bridge. That logic carried him across the Channel with Jasper, toward Brittany, bargaining, and long exile. Jasper ferried the boy to Brittany, trading English danger for continental caution. Ports smelled of tar and salt, courtiers smelled opportunity, and sometimes ransom. Duke Francis offered shelter, part charity, part leverage, in games with England and France. Residences changed, castles, towns, guest wings, each with different servants and carefully limited freedoms. Guardians counted visitors, scribes logged gifts, cooks measured loyalty by who shared tables. Was exile a prison with softer walls, or a school where patience earned dividends? The lad learned languages, swords, and silence, watching diplomats bargain over futures not yet born. He understood that protection could flip to barter if the wind shifted overnight. Friends arrived slowly, a tutor with good maps, a priest with better questions. Some companions were spies, some were kind, most were practical, and all were listening. News from England arrived irregularly. Victories, pardons, executions, each letter a weather report with teeth. Editorial note: sources scatter on exact addresses and months. The pattern of guarded hospitality is consistent. His health wavered at times, perhaps from stress, diet, or winter damp in riverside rooms. That fragility made him valuable and vulnerable, a hostage to fortune and to rumor. He practiced being watchful, grateful, and forgettable, the safest posture for a claimant abroad. The near consequence is human. Distance thickened between mother and son, even as hopes converged. Bridge. That distance demanded a thread. Letters, couriers, and codes stitched across the Channel. Letters became lifelines, brief, guarded, and routed through hands chosen for discretion. A recipe could hide a date. A saint's day could hide a rendezvous. Trusted messengers were paid in candles, cloth, and secrets they agreed never to remember. She wrote in measured phrases, sprinkling piety that read as ordinary charity work. He answered with gratitude and questions, practicing caution like prayer, steady and habitual. How do you speak plainly about dynastic risk when censors read over every shoulder? Ciphers reduced meaning to patterns. Code names softened exposure if bags were searched suddenly. Stewards copied drafts. Chaplains carried packets past guards who counted only chalices and alms. Merchants helped too, slipping notes into cargo lists and invoices that crossed borders easily. Editorial note: specific alphabets and keys are lost. Contemporaries confirm disguising intent within safe topics. John Morton's circle later tightened the web, aligning sympathizers without public oaths or banners. Information moved like river traffic, slow in drought, urgent in flood, relentless either way. Each letter carried two weights: a mother's concern and a strategist's calibrated requests. Failure meant interception. Success meant one more stitch in a landing plan years ahead. Discretion trained a new muscle, command exercised without trumpets, through scheduling and quiet favors. The near consequence is strategic. Correspondence built a shadow staff before any army assembled. Bridge. With that staff in place, marriage to Thomas Stanley turned information into insurance. Thomas Stanley entered like a calculus problem: variables in armor, constants in land and men. He was seasoned, pragmatic, and famous for moving late and landing safely. Marriage to him offered cover. Sheriffs deferred, courtiers listened, and enemies hesitated. She gained corridors, messengers, and a roof that discouraged inquisitive visits from officials. Household lists swelled: grooms, clerks, chaplains, each a potential censor for rumor or quiet opportunity. Was this a love match or a contract stapled to a moving throne? Stanley valued survival, she valued leverage. Together they rehearsed neutrality as a visible virtue. Gifts to shrines signaled piety. Gifts to widows signaled trustworthiness in regions that remembered wars. Private dinners sorted allies from spectators who brought news, who merely wanted proximity. He tested weather with scouts and letters. She read tides through ladies' talk and almoners. Editorial note: chroniclers portray Stanley as deliberately indecipherable, a policy masquerading as temperament. Her new title insulated old loyalties, masking Lancastrian sympathies behind acceptable, Yorkist-facing routine. If the crown shifted again, his reticence would preserve options she intended to convert. She learned to fold plans into family business: leases, fares, hospitality. So risk looked ordinary. The marriage also softened penalties of earlier defiance, restoring influence that guardians once rationed. The near consequence was reach. Her messages traveled farther, safer, and faster than before. Bridge. That reach mattered when a sudden vacancy at the heart of power changed everything. Edward IV then aged into a capable peace, then left a kingdom not ready for absence. His death jolted councils, households, and the tall stack of promises holding order together. A boy heir meant guardianship, factions, and arguments about who counted as family enough. She recognized openings inside mourning, the hours when couriers run and clerks forget sleep. Stanley's networks mapped the court. Hers mapped parishes and women who heard things first. Could grief be both sincere devotion and an instrument for necessary political movement? Merchants murmured about ports. Sheriffs noted oaths. Priests recorded gossip disguised as moral instruction. In this confusion, even small courtesies, a loaned carriage, a shared confessor, became leverage. Her letters turned bolder in subtext, testing whether sympathizers would risk gentle, deniable favors. Editorial note: specific phrasing is lost, alignment emerges from recipients, timing, and later outcomes. The prince's custody debate grew louder. Legitimacy felt suddenly negotiable rather than inevitable. She counted which doors opened quietly, which closed loudly, and which admitted only servants. Every tally informed the next courier's route and the pace of information she requested. The Queen's kin scrambled, magnates rehearsed loyalty. London listened for hoofbeats at dusk. Where public ritual hid uncertainty, private calendars guided people who intended to shape succession. The near consequence was momentum. Plans, once speculative, now acquired timetables and willing hands. Bridge. That momentum met an obstacle and an opportunity in 1483. One man's seizure of power. Spring grief turned to summer calculation when Edward IV died and left a boy. Edward V rode toward London. His uncle, Richard of Gloucester, stepped forward as protector. Within weeks, custody shifted, councils splintered, and arguments hardened about marriage law and heirs. A sermon hinted at invalid vows. A statute soon declared the princes illegitimate altogether. Processions continued, but trust evaporated. Pageantry, without the glue of broadly accepted consent. Did legality follow conscience that season, or did power manufacture a legality it required? Rumor outpaced riders. The two boys withdrew from view, and prayers grew anxious. Merchants stalled shipments, sheriffs delayed choices. Courtiers rehearsed loyalty in cautious, reversible phrases. She read the moment clearly. Legitimacy had become a question, not a settled inheritance. That uncertainty created openings for correspondence, pledges, and the discreet movement of small sums. Editorial note: sources diverge on motives and timing. Agreement focuses on rapid concentration of authority. Clergy whispered in chancels. Widows compared notes. A message network thickened behind public mourning. Every day without a coronation made new commitments slightly easier to request and grant. Her letters traveled farther, wearing the clothing of charity, hospitality, and seasonal obligation. The goal sharpened. Bring the exile home not as a petitioner, but as a remedy. The near consequence was recruitment, quiet, targeted, and framed as the cure for a spreading doubt. Bridge. To turn doubt into motion, plans split. One rebellion inside England, one landing from Brittany. The blueprint unfurled in two theaters, John Morton's web at home and sails abroad. Morton coached nobles and gentry, translating discontent into schedules, passwords, and rendezvous points. Across the channel, courtiers bargained for ships, money, and a weather window worth trusting. Henry gathered men in Brittany, promising wages and mercy, promising order after landfall. In England, fires were to rise county by county, drawing sheriffs into paralysis. Could two clocks truly strike together, oaths in market towns, anchors lifting in foreign harbors? October answered with storms, coasts closed, messengers arrived soaked, late, and frighteningly certain. Henry's fleet turned back battered. Inland rising sputtered, then collapsed under arrest and apologies. Buckingham wavered, then failed. His river swelled, his allies hesitated, his name darkened quickly. Her letters shifted tone from momentum to damage control, protecting friends from fatal association. Editorial note: weather is documented. Precise numbers and pledges vary by chronicle and later memoir. The failure brought searches, interrogations, and confiscations that tested every borrowed favor she held. Some sympathizers fled, others deepened their cover, a few recanted loudly to survive scrutiny. She absorbed the lesson that grand debuts die when logistics ignore the season's cruelty. From exile, Henry vowed to try again, choosing patience over bravado and better charts. The near consequence was peril. Networks exposed, fortunes at risk, and a mother placed under watch. Bridge. Surveillance tightened into formal restraint, forcing her to plot under household arrest with Stanley's shadow. After the failed risings, the king's officers visited thresholds with lists and cool voices. Searches followed, inventories lengthened, questions arrived that assumed answers already chosen. Parliament later recorded penalties. Her estates were redirected into her husband's formal keeping. Custody hardened into a domestic cage, comfortable rooms, watchful stewards, and permission required for errands. Was this leniency or strategy? Mercy or a leash designed to look like courtesy? Letters slowed, then resumed through safer hands. Servants learned to forget what they carried. Visitors came fewer and earlier in the day, when curtains made eavesdropping inconvenient. Household chapels stayed busy, prayer schedules camouflaged private conferences, and messages folded into alms. Roles from the period show restraint rather than a dungeon, a difference that mattered. She lost public voice but kept proximity to a husband whose neutrality purchased room. Stanley's posture remained famously unreadable, giving her both cover and constant uncertainty about timing. Clerks adjusted account books to satisfy sheriffs while preserving the means for future promises. Neighbors learned to speak in parables. Widows accepted gifts that sometimes hid travel money. Restriction refined her method, smaller requests, shorter routes, and favors that looked like household routine. The near consequence was adaptation. Surveillance forced discipline, and discipline rebuilt momentum invisibly. Bridge. Momentum needed a horizon, charts, tides, and a landing where allegiance could turn the field. She treated house arrest as a timetable, not a wall, coaching couriers to breathe patience. A laundry list could mark a harbor. A prayer roll could mask a payroll. Chaplains carried blessings and names. Factors carried invoices and coded meeting places along trade roads. Did obedience in daylight buy enough darkness to finish the preparations she required? Across the channel, negotiations ripened. Support pledged cautiously, ships promised if weather and signals aligned. France's shifting priorities opened doors. Brittany's uncertainties opened others, depending on who answered letters. She calibrated promises carefully. Mercy to wavering gentry, payment to captains, legitimacy to anxious towns. Stanley's network added resilience. His scouts measured sheriffs' tempers and which bridges stayed unguarded. Household spending disguised advance wages, feast days disguised musters, hospitality disguised interviews with messengers. Contemporary traces are oblique expenses, travel notes, and sudden repairs along likely marching routes. The plan matured into a choreography disembark, gather, publish oaths, and refuse reckless speed inland. She emphasized patience over flair, a lesson hammered home by storms the previous autumn. Her role remained offstage yet central, a strategist writing stage directions no actor would read. Every hour under watch clarified a single objective return the exile as a remedy. The near consequence was readiness money placed, allies primed, and routes rehearsed to the day. Bridge. Readiness met the coast at Milford Haven, where August 1485 turned planning into battle. August wind pushed sails toward Milford Haven, where tides and rumor finally agreed. He stepped ashore not as a wanderer, but as a remedy with a schedule. Welsh gentry weighed old loyalties, then joined, persuaded by kinship, prudence, and careful promises. The column moved inland, disciplined, unspectacular, gathering men who preferred order to another gamble. Was victory a gift of fate, or the dividend of patient logistics and listening? Scouts mapped bridges, letters synchronized musters. Stanley's watchers measured which banners might pivot late. Richard marched hard, confident in position and in the terror his charge could generate. Bosworth's field narrowed choices to steel, mud, and a crown within arm's reach. Richard lunged for the air. Stanley moved at last. The balance flipped in minutes. The king fell. The banner dipped. A circlet was raised on a blood-dark hill. Witnesses named Henry VII, not the VIII, an important precision for later storytellers. Prayers followed, then proclamations, then a controlled entry that looked like peace rehearsing itself. Chroniclers love the moment of the crown. Ledgers love the moment pay chests open. Both agree the campaign ended cleanly, a rarity earned by months of quiet groundwork. The near consequence is nation-shaping. Legitimacy re-entered the room, and reluctant allies exhaled together. Bridge. Legitimacy needs roots. Marriage, rituals, and a household where a mother's new title carried weight. They called her My Lady the King's Mother, a style that signaled rank and reach. She held lands, influence, and a household whose corridors hummed with controlled, purposeful activity. Councils sought her counsel. Confessors praised discipline more than splendor in sermons remembered long after. Henry married Elizabeth of York, stitching roses together and cooling factions with a cradle's promise. Ceremony followed policy. Pageantry protected fragile consent while treasurers balanced recovering ledgers. Did power finally feel safe in her hands, or merely less precarious than before? She sponsored scholars, endowed altars, and timed gifts to strengthen dioceses and college commons. Quiet rooms returned the favor. Archdeacons, masters, and printers who amplified loyal, practical learning. Household ordinances reflected preference for order, early prayers, careful accounts, and punctual, honest wages. Letters continued, warmer now. Recommendations placed widows, clerks, and tutors in dignified positions. Distance with her son softened in ritual. Audiences, festivals, and a government that lived nearby. Still, the years of separation had written a gravity none of them fully erased. She steered with restraint, choosing influence that survived sickness, rumor, and one bad harvest. Stanley's inscrutable caution complemented her steadiness, insulating the court's nerves during measured consolidation. The near consequence is stability. A dynasty looked possible, not merely proclaimed within guarded walls. Bridge. The ledger of her later years will show foundations, vows, and an ending near another coronation. Her later years braided piety, policy, and a scholar's tidy love of order. She endowed lectureships in divinity, renewed Christ's College, and set St. John's in motion. Chaplains became bishops, students became clerks. Ideas traveled faster than armored couriers ever could. Household statutes prized early prayers, good accounts, and wages paid on time without drama. Did learning serve God first, or the realm, or both in proportions she judged wisely? She took a vow of chastity within marriage, redefining status as service rather than display. John Fisher advised her. Printers found work. Poor scholars found patronage and precise expectations. Her son's health failed. Governance leaned harder on routine, ordinances, audits, and cautious appointments. In April 1509, Henry died. The crown passed to the young Henry VIII. She steered ceremonies and households through mourning into coronation with measured, competent authority. Accounts list cloth for processions, alms for funerals, and gifts for a fragile new court. Weeks later, she weakened. June closed around a life disciplined into purpose and patience. Chroniclers praised fortitude more than sentiment. Foundations carried the more accurate record of her will. Her bequests stabilized colleges that would outlast parliaments, factions, and several royal tempers. Accuracy matters here. The mother who midwifed a dynasty died beside another beginning. The near consequence is durable. Institutions she shaped kept teaching long after banners changed color. Bridge. With the ledger balanced, the close gathers the lesson. How a narrow life altered a wide map. Return to that winter room at Pembroke and listen for the breath she caught. A girl was asked to be a treaty, a womb, a witness, and a will. Power rarely began with pageantry. It grew from schedules, couriers, and rooms arranged for listening. Which habit matters most now? Patient coordination, disciplined money, or networks that speak softly across divides? Correct names matter too. Henry VII, not the eighth, fixes timelines and agency. When we get the facts straight, we see the choices that cost blood and sleep. Her survival tactics, measured obedience, careful letters, timely generosity, became tools for peace after war. Her piety was not ornament, it was scaffolding that held focus under scrutiny. Her marriages were not romances, they were weather systems navigated with maps and endurance. The immediate lesson is plain. Institutions outlast tempers when someone funds them with precision. States grow steadier when information moves safely, and when caregivers own part of the calendar. Narratives grow healthier when we resist glamorous mistakes and honor the small documented hinges. The near consequence for us is practical. Budget for verification, not spectacle. Teach method, not myth. Honor a mother who rebuilt agency inside constraints, and a strategist who scheduled a dynasty. Carry forward one question worth policy and prayer. Where are today's soft networks quietly steering fate? If we can name them clearly, we can ask them for accountability as well as miracles.